Bloat. No, we're not talking about how I feel after a Sunday dinner. We are talking Bloat from 2025. Directed and written by Pablo Cento and stars Ben McKenzie. And this is, I guess you would call it a found footage movie about the Japanese folklore creature, the Kappa. Now, I say it's kind of like a found footage movie. It's almost like one of those COVID era movies where the bulk of the film is over some type of video chat or instant messaging and things like that. The story is about Ben McKenzie's character, who is working for the US military, and he has to work while his family are on vacation in Japan. Whilst in Japan, their youngest son gets into trouble whilst he's swimming, and you know, they're worried that he is going to drown, but he seems to recover. But ever since the accident, there's something a little different about him, and he seems to be displaying some odd behaviour. And also, as Ben McKenzie's character is trying to communicate over, you know, FaceTime and things like that, he's noticing some kind of like odd things, like the boy's eyes kind of glowing green and things like that, and he deduces that he may well be possessed by the spirit of a Kappa, a entity from Japanese folklore. He requests the help of his friend who lives in Japan to try and help him. What will happen? You have to watch the movie and find out. So let us discuss. Okay, so if you're a fan of the found footage genre, this is kind of a sub-genre of that, the kind of the laptop found footage style movie, I guess. Host, Unfriended, things like that, and I think some of the producers might actually be, you know, have worked on those movies that have worked on this one, and it does make it. You have a little bit of variety, I suppose. There's different sort of setups. We get security cameras. We get, you know, screen grabs of different kind of messaging and things like that. FaceTiming, instant messaging, all that sort of thing. So we have a little bit of difference in regards to just your bog standard walking around with a camcorder sort of thing, and the movie tries to be somewhat kind of stylistic in regards to how it displays this. Like, for example, it will zoom in on certain things, or it will kind of change the this perspective and, you know, twist the screen and stuff to make it seem a little bit more out there at times. So you have a little bit more of the kind of the direction and the art direction in regards to the proceedings to kind of add a little bit more drama to it. This is one of these found footage movies that does have a kind of a soundtrack to it as well. So again, it plays almost like a cross between you know, a traditionally filmed, more gritty and raw found footage movie to more of the produced style, traditional style horror movies that you may have had. I think the idea of you know, a Japanese kind of spirit, this Kappa, is an interesting kind of idea. You know, affecting someone who's not from Japan and they're not familiar with the folklore. I think the acting is solid. Ben McKenzie, you may know, as I say, from the TV show Gotham. He's, you know, a solid actor here, and I think the cast all do pretty well. There's one character, his friend, this Japanese soldier guy, that is a little bit over the top, but I think that's maybe the way the character was written. But I think the acting is all kind of fine. And there's some interesting kind of like tie-ins to kind of pop culture, the way that it tries to explain how kind of the supernatural is dealing with the digital world, and how it's, you know, how kind of digital footage is being manipulated by spirits, and how it can kind of, you know, show up sometimes when it might not show up in other cases, but also manipulate it and stuff like that. So there's some interesting kind of world building in kind of regard to this. So I think there's some decent ideas here. The movie's plot actually follows a relatively kind of straightforward kind of narrative, so it's kind of easy to follow the broad strokes of it. I would say you get the idea here of what's kind of going on. For the older son, for example, seems to catch on that something's not quite right, and him and his son are remotely sort of trying to figure out what's kind of going on and stuff. The wife seems to be somewhat kind of losing it, and inevitably it comes to a you know, an explosive finale. Okay, so what doesn't work in this movie? I think the kind of the FaceTime style horror movies are a very, very specific market. Because, and this movie I think has a lot of time spent looking at text, typing text, reading kind of articles, watching kind of blurry sort of screens like from a third party. And I have to say, I think this movie loses some of its tension because you almost feel like you're watching over the Ben McKenzie's character's shoulder. You're not actually there with actually the action that is kind of going on. A lot of the kind of the draw of found footage movies is you get sucked in because you feel like you're there with these characters, whilst that's not the case here. You're looking like at Ben McKenzie's character looking at this stuff, so you don't quite feel as sort of drawn in as maybe a traditional found footage might sort of work in that respect. There is a lot of time wasted in this movie just kind of like, as I say, meandering around looking at like blurry screens or digitized effects or static, or just kind of looking at, you know, articles and things like this that I think slows the movie down and creates some kind of pacing issues. I do question some of the logic that's involved here in regard to sort of the way the characters are acting. Like, we learn that Ben McKenzie can't go on this vacation because he's in an active service and he can't go. So the family go off fine. But when stuff starts to happen, if you had a near-death experience, you would come back to your home, the States. I mean, they said that, the stress of flying might be too much for the young boy, which is how they try and kind of get around it. But after a while, after a couple of days, surely you would kind of come back, particularly when he seems to have kind of recovered, at least that's how the mum sees it. And then we have like this Japanese friend who Ben McKenzie's character kind of asks to help, and he sort of goes there. And I was like, what exactly you are intending to do? Because he brings like a rifle with him and like night goggles. And I'm thinking, so you think your son is possessed at this point? So what are you intending to do with a gun exactly? And I'm just like, and he seems a little bit over the top as well. And I was expecting, because he tells the oldest son that he's sending a friend, and I was expecting them to kind of like surveil together and stuff like that, but that never really happens. It almost seems like this sort of character is off doing his own thing and never really kind of has any interaction with anyone else. It all seems a little bit kind of scattershot, to be honest with you. In regards to, do you see things on screen? When you do, it's very kind of like blurry or digitized, or kind of like there's interference somehow, so you never really feel like you're looking at very much. And I have to say, the end of the movie leaves you wanting to kind of like, okay, I need to know how the end, the story completes ultimately, because you're left at a certain point, but there is still some idea of like, okay, there still is some ramifications that could be, as a viewer, we would like to know how it kind of ended up and things like that. I think you can probably guess based on how the movie kind of presents up until that point, but it was, you know, this movie I feel does leave a little bit on the table. Overall, I think this is an interesting and somewhat artistically flourished movie, but I don't think it is particularly gripping. I think the idea here of watching someone watch this investigation or be kind of more passively involved is just not as kind of like enthralling as had, you know, a traditionally found movie, or even a typical kind of style found footage movie. And as such, I think that the movie doesn't kind of reel you in as much. And just the story, as I say, some of the elements here just feel a little bit like ill thought out, and lots of kind of like wasted sort of dead air on space. So I'll give it a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think? Please do leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.